This Chinese stealth fighter can command a swarm of drones while staying invisible. And in 2025, it's already flying. How did a second seat turn China's stealth jet into a Raptor hunter? This is why the J-20S is built to beat the F-22, starting with the why. China's battlefield isn't a border, it's an ocean. Out here, the Pacific stretches everything: fuel plans, radar range, pilot nerves. Miss the math on distance and you don't just lose speed, you lose the fight. That's why the original J-20 was built like a long-distance hitter. Big fuel inside the body to stay out there. A large nose to house a serious AESA radar. Internal bays built for missiles that can reach before the other guy even knows he's in trouble. See the canards up front and the delta wing? That's the giveaway. This isn't a Raptor copy. It's a different bet. Instead of being the quietest knife at the merge every time, it aims to be the spear that lands first from far away. So ask yourself, in a theater measured in hundreds of miles, who really controls the first move? Now fold in the second seat. The J-20S takes that long-reach plan and turns it into a team sport. That extra crew member isn't along for the view, they're the mission director. Think drones pushed forward as scouts, jammers muddying the picture, sensors sorted and stitched together so the formation sees without shouting. In a Raptor, one pilot plays every instrument. In the J-20S, the front seater flies the jet while the back seater runs the board, tasking loyal wingmen, shaping the electronic space, and setting up shots that don't look like the old single-lock, single-missile play. Air combat used to be a duel. What happens when one side shows up with a swarm? Put the F-22 and a baseline J-20 side by side and the design choices jump out. The Raptor is stealthy from every angle, with inlets and canted tails shaved for silence and thrust vectoring nozzles that let it point without bleeding energy. Its Supercruise is clean, carries a deep internal air-to-air load, and even keeps a gun for the rare close-in moment that decides everything. Its software and data links have been sharpened for years. It is, by intent, a pure air dominance blade. The J-20 comes at the problem later and larger. More fuel on board, a big AESA up front, an infrared sensor under the chin, apertures around the jet for full circle awareness, and very long-reach weapons meant to end the fight before the turning starts. Early engines were a handicap, but as WS-15s roll in, the energy picture changes. Supercruise becomes credible, climb improves, and the thrust gap shrinks. And if you've seen a J-20 prototype flexing vectoring in test clips, you know exactly which door they're trying to open next. Here's the sharp part. The J-20S doesn't just bring a second seat, it brings a conductor for an unmanned orchestra. Think of a one-manned jet out front and 4 drones fanned ahead like probing fingers. Which one is the real threat? Which one is bait? Which one is carrying the jammer that will blind your tidy data link? The backseater's job is to answer those questions in real time, to push expendable scouts forward, to hide the shooters in safer rings, and to time everything so an enemy pilot is always choosing between bad options. Sounds familiar? It should. What used to be a face-to-face duel now looks a lot more like a carefully staged trick. So what does that do to decision-making in a fight? Imagine you're the pilot who trained to see and shoot first. Now every blip could be a decoy, every radar lock could be a trap, and every shot might hand your position to half a dozen attackers. Do you light your radar to find the real threat and risk being painted, or wait and hope your passive cues are enough? Either way, the clock is moving toward the missile that might already be threading the sky. Range turns those puzzles into actual outcomes. The J-20 family carries fuel and stays on station longer, which matters when tankers are scarce and the Pacific can swallow seconds like nothing. The consequence is simple. The jet that can stay where it needs to be gets first chance at shaping the fight. The US response has been practical, new low-drag tanks and pylons to stretch the Raptor's legs without wrecking what makes it quiet. In short, both sides are racing to control where a fight happens, because whoever chooses the ground and distance usually picks the terms of engagement. Sensors are the next deciding move. You can polish stealth until dawn, But heat and passive listening don't care about paint jobs. Infrared systems see the warmth of engines and friction against the cold sky. Passive arrays listen for emissions a radar would rather not give away. If you can spot a target by what it emits instead of what bounces back to you, you don't have to shout to find it. That's why adding quiet, passive eyes matters so much. It lets an aircraft track without turning on the lights and handing the fight to somebody else. Then there's the missile geometry. Throwing long-range shots is one way to end a fight before it starts. One platform's opening salvo can decide the night if its missiles reach first. The J-20's initial internal fit prioritizes heavy, far-reaching weapons, while the American answer is a new, longer-range missile that extends the Raptor's reach. This is a classic arms race. If your opponent's spear keeps growing, you either step back or make yours longer. Which brings us back to the same question. When weapons and networks and drones all move together, who really gets to say when the fight begins? Let's start with the reason that a second seat exists. Modern air combat isn't really jet versus jet anymore. It's network versus network. China even says the quiet part out loud. Break the system, not the spear tip. That's why the J-20S isn't just flying with wingmen. It's trying to cut the lines that make your wingmen smart. The backseater isn't sightseeing. They're sculpting the fight. One moment they're muddying the data links that let F-35s share a perfect picture. The next they're cueing drones to shadow, bait, and flush targets without the mothership lighting up its own radar. Think less ace pulling 9 Gs, more quarterback reading the field. And look where those plays land. The Pacific. Long legs to reach what matters. Enough low observability to arrive uninvited. Enough speed to pick the exit. Enough punch that the first salvo changes the night. So here's the question, if the fight is a web, who wins? The sharpest blade or the best router? Scale makes that question heavier. The Raptor community is small and older than it looks on paper, with only a slice mission ready at any moment. China is pushing J-20 variants out in volume, and the trend line points up, not sideways. Even if you give the Raptor the edge pilot to pilot, wars don't settle in one sortie. Attrition trims even the finest knife, and numbers keep showing up. Now add drones to that arithmetic. One J-20S hurting 4 loyal wingmen isn't a single contact. It's a 5-node package. For such formations don't feel like 4 planes, they feel like 20 problems at once. If the bracket isn't 1 versus 1 anymore, how do you keep your math honest? Freeze the world and drop 1 Raptor and 1 baseline J-20 into clean air with equal pilots, no help, no tricks. The safe bet holds. All aspect stealth, real Supercruise, thrust vector agility, deeper internal missile load, and a gun in reserve make the F-22 the better knife in a fair knife fight. But reality doesn't freeze. Reality lets the J-20 take a forward posture on internal fuel, soak in offboard cues from ground arrays and airborne radars, and use that second seat to conduct a formation like an orchestra. In that world, the first look might come from somewhere the Raptor is trying not to talk to. The first shot might launch from a teammate you never saw. And the merge you trained to win, it might never happen. So ask yourself, how do you beat a duel that refuses to become a duel? There's a sharper edge to this strategy. The J-20S isn't only hunting fighters, it's stalking what fighters need to survive. Tankers are the quiet heroes of Pacific missions and the softest targets in the sky. Carriers are the moving airfields that tie the map together. Forward bases are the stitches between islands. You don't have to beat a Raptor over blue water if you can make it run out of air or runway on your terms. With reach to find the gas, stealth to get close, and unmanned eyes to pry open the route, a J-20S package can push tankers back, shove carriers east, crack runways when it hurts most, and suddenly things shift, even if nobody plants a flag that says air superiority. That's systems destruction in motion. You don't need a perfect jet if the perfect jet can't show up. Is the J-20S magic? No, it's a stack of choices. Some smart, some borrowed, many refined. You can see the lineage if you squint. Planform echoes of Russia's MiG 1.44. a forward fuselage and intake philosophy that feel very familiar to anyone who's stared at an F-22 or F-35, and a Chinese industrial base that turns inspiration into airframes. Early birds flew with stopgap engines. The WS-15 promises the thrust and supercruise they wanted, but it still has to prove itself over a full life. Those canards buy lift and control at the cost of a tougher stealth puzzle off-axis. But Beijing isn't grading itself on elegance. It's grading itself on outcomes. If the result is a jet that flies farther, sees enough, throws long, and brings 4 robots to a knife fight, that's a trade they'll make every day. And does purity matter if practicality wins the opening hour? So what does Washington do? Hope? Not a plan. You sharpen the blade you have and teach it new tricks. That's why the conversation sounds like Super Raptor instead of new factory line. Low drag, low observable tanks and pylons stretch the legs without throwing away Supercruise. A modern infrared search and track package lets the jet hunt by heat while staying radio quiet. A longer reach missile closes the distance gap against threats that like to throw first. And under the hood, software switches the role from lone wolf to field general, pushing fuse tracks to F-35s, to drones, to whatever 6th-gen platform shows up next, so the best eyes in the sky make everyone's weapons smarter. The secret remains the ecosystem. Signatures, emissions discipline, maintenance habits, joint choreography. You don't copy that in a sprint. But here's the real check. Can you adapt faster than the problem evolves? None of that hand waves away what the J-20S brings. The WS-15's muscle unlocks altitude and speed that shape fights before a bay door opens. Supercruise without afterburner shifts both engagement timing and fuel math, which matters when every waypoint is an ocean away. A dedicated crew member for jamming, decoys, and drone tasking multiplies what one airframe can do in the first 5 minutes. And when stealth rules relax, the internal volume and external options give planners more ways to mix missions without swapping jets. The point isn't to deny those strengths, it's to track where they're aimed, your links, your gas, your tempo. So if the Dragon is built to bend your rhythm instead of chase your tail, what would you change first to get the beat back? People love the one-on-one showdown. It's tidy. 2 jets, 2 pilots, 1 winner. It makes great coffee table arguments and even better comment threads. But the real contest isn't a highlight reel. It's a marathon of factories, spare parts, flight hours, and logistics. Who can keep planes flying for years without grounding squadrons? Who can replace lost airframes faster than attrition eats through capability? Those are the questions that decide wars, not the viral clip of a perfect dogfight. So ask yourself, would you rather own one flawless blade or an entire armory that keeps coming back? Look at the math differently. A squadron's edge is more than raw performance, it's how many trained pilots you have, how quickly you can turn a jet around after a mission, and whether your supply chain collapses under pressure. Add in loyal wingmen, autonomous or controlled, and a single sortie becomes a small campaign. If one side can flood the sky with coordinated nodes while the other must guard a shrinking pool of tankers and forward strips, the map itself rewrites who gets to fight where. Isn't that a scarier outcome than a fair, uncluttered duel? Now, about purpose. The J-20S isn't a bet on being prettier or nimbler, it's a bet on bending the rules. It aims to shift the fight away from the places Raptors want to be, near clean air and emissions discipline, and push it into messy logistics and network warfare. You don't have to beat the best dogfighter in a turning fight if you can force it into a grind for fuel, basing, and uninterrupted data links. So what matters more, winning a single scrap or making sure the scrap never happens on your terms? There's another uncomfortable truth. Systems beat platforms when they're used right. If sensors, satellites, ships, and airframes all feed the same picture, then a well-placed wave of cheaper platforms can look like a much larger force. If you can blind that picture or jam the wires that knit it together, you've already taken a swing at the opponent's heart. The J-20S seems designed with that logic in mind: coordinate, obscure, and then strike. If you were in command, what would you protect first? The jets, the tankers, or the links that make both useful? Still, neither side is flawless. One pursues near-perfect performance and accepts costs and slow production. The other trades a bit of purity for scale and adaptability. Over time, those choices clash. You can respond with better missiles, smarter sensors, longer legs, or your own unmanned partners. You can retool factories and rewrite tactics. But everything slows down without urgency. So the real race is for speed. How quickly can you turn plans and prototypes into pilots in the air and systems that actually work under pressure? Here's the short, unavoidable conclusion. If you freeze a fair fight in clean air, the best single airframe still wins. But war rarely gives you a frozen box to play in. When the question becomes whether you can break the systems that support the knife, the spear backed by a network starts to look very dangerous. It's not that one is magic and the other useless. They're different answers to different problems. The hard part is that the J-20S's problem, can you collapse an opponent's rhythm faster than they rebuild, may decide the next decade. Until there's a cheaper, faster, more networked way to unseat the Raptor's stealth and kinematics advantage, the J-20S will keep changing how the skies are fought. If clear, no-nonsense breakdowns like this help you, hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next deep dive.